The final terms of the peace would be decided at a conference in Paris. Although no sitting U.S. president had ever traveled to Europe, there was no question that Woodrow Wilson would make the trip. He set sail for France on December 4th, 1918, carrying with him the hopes of the world for a peace that would last for all time.
He was greeted rapturously. He was regarded as the embodiment of this fresh new force from the other side of the Atlantic that had brought this horrible, bloody conflict to an end.
He went to Paris, to London, to Rome. Children threw roses at his feet. Millions of people turned out to see him. He was the hero, the savior out of the West.
Wilson had to make many compromises in Paris, but when the treaty was finally signed at the Palace of Versailles, he had gotten what he wanted most, a provision for the establishment of the League of Nations. Still, as he sailed for home, there was one stumbling block remaining: approval by the Republican-controlled U.S. Senate. In Washington, Wilson faced vehement opposition from Senator Henry Cabot Lodge, the powerful Republican chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee.
When Wilson came home from Paris, he insisted on hand-delivering the treaty to the Senate. And when he got to the Senate door, Henry Cabot Lodge asked Wilson if he could carry in the treaty. And Wilson turned to Lodge and said, "Not on your life, Senator."
Refusing to negotiate with the Senate, Wilson sought to rally public opinion for the treaty. To do so, he set out on a physically demanding cross-country speaking tour.
He never listened to his doctor, who kept saying, "Take it easy on this trip, don't strain yourself." He insisted on doing it. It was in Pueblo, Colorado. He suddenly was overcome. It was a physical collapse at that point, and he had to curtail his barnstorming around the country, return to Washington, where he suffered a severe stroke.
Wilson really was seriously impaired by that stroke. From October 1919 till March 1921, the United States really didn't have much of a chief executive in Woodrow Wilson.
Edith Wilson was fiercely protective of her husband. She kept most visitors away and tried to cover up the severity of his condition. She also took it upon herself to relay important matters of state to the president and report back on what Wilson was thinking.
For the 18 months remaining in the presidency, one could almost say that indeed Mrs. Wilson was a kind of president. It was an extraordinary moment in American history.
Wilson's illness clearly contributed to the political gridlock that spread over the Capitol at this terribly crucial moment, with the League and the treaty at stake.
On March 19, 1920, the ailing president was informed that the treaty, and therefore the League of Nations, had met its final defeat in the Senate. He replied, "They have shamed us in the eyes of the world." Wilson's failure to compromise had far-reaching implications. Without U.S. support, the League of Nations proved ineffective, setting the stage for another generation to fight another world war.
I happen to think if Wilson had been healthy, he would have given enough ground so that the Senate would have had to go along with the Treaty of Versailles. The United States would have joined the League of Nations, and the course of world history over the next 20 years might have been materially different.
Despite his failure to get the treaty ratified, Woodrow Wilson had succeeded in laying the cornerstone for a new relationship between America and the world.
That idea of what the proper role of the United States vis-a-vis the world ought to be, Wilson really is the first president to grapple with that whole set of problems and ideas. And, we're still trying to sort that out today.